Hello everyone and welcome to the last day of the Aquatic Animal Welfare Conference and to our session with myself, Clara, and Koushik Raghavan, who works with the Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organizations as a research monitoring and evaluation officer. I'm really glad to be joined by all of you today as our audience. And I would just like to briefly say that the session will be 20 minutes, and then at the end, we will have 5 minutes for questions. For questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And we will try and get through all of the questions. However, if we can't get through all of the questions, we will post them along with the recording of the YouTube video later on. So all that's left for me to say now is to hand it over to Koushik Raghavan, who will be talking about the state of affairs of aquaculture in India.
Hope you're all having a good day. I don't know what time it is in different parts of the country, so I'm just saying good day to you all. I work with FIAPO as a Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organizations as a generalist researcher and also as a monitoring and evaluations officer. I would like to first offer my gratitude to the organizers of this conference and also to some of my colleagues who have helped me with the data that I'm going to share. I'm going to be talking about the state of affairs of aquaculture in India from an investigation that we did across 240 farms in the country. As Shreya had already talked about the macro perspective in terms of aquaculture in India, I'm going to be talking about it with some evidence that we have collected from field investigations. So to begin with, I'll start with some statistics. The production stats are mind-boggling. From aquaculture, we have surpassed the production of fish from aquaculture since 2015 when compared with capture fisheries. You can see the data there, and the trend in terms of growth is also continuously increasing in terms of aquaculture since 2015. In terms of capture fisheries, it has attained a plateau and is also showing a declining trend. So as you can see here, on the left-hand side graph, the production from aquaculture is continuously on the rise, while the one from capture fisheries has attained a plateau and is also showing a negative growth rate at minus 3.8%. This is the main reason why we want to focus on aquaculture in India. And if you look at the culture environment in which these in which fishes are grown, you can see that in freshwater, the amount of production of fish from freshwater has seen a 15.3% growth. In terms of brackish water, it shows 7.2% growth. But in terms of marine aquaculture or mariculture, it is staying stagnant, and also the scale is considerably small compared to freshwater and brackish water. So the main focus for us is to work on freshwater and brackish water aquaculture, and not necessarily dive into mariculture right now. So looking at the population of two of the major fish categories or aquatic life categories that are grown in India. They are Indian major carps in freshwater farms and white-leg shrimp in brackish water farms. These are estimates. The production figures are from FAO 2018. And the estimated numbers have been, the numbers have been calculated from fishcount.org.uk. And currently it stands at 4 billion, just the Indian major carps, the three fishes shown here, Katla, Mrigal, and Rohu. And in terms of white-leg shrimp, it is 12.44 billion, assuming a weight of 50 grams per shrimp. The production rate is also in line with the growth rate of aquaculture and brackish water aquaculture production. The states that are showing considerably increasing amount of fish production, I'll talk about aquaculture in a bit. You can see that on the left-hand side graph that this is an indication, this is a comparison between inland fish production and the total fish production in the state. The blue ones are inland fisheries, and the orange one is the total capture. But on the right hand side, you can see that this is just the production figures for inland fish production. And if you look at the states, there is very little overlap. I think only 4 states are represented in both of these figures, which means that these are some of these states don't have a coast nearby. But the inland fish production is considerably higher, which means that the existing areas or the resources in the country are being exploited for aquaculture, and it is a serious concern. And from a scale, from the suffering that is going to be imposed on animals potentially, is significantly higher because of the fact that there is an increasing trend in terms of promoting aquaculture in the country. Based on an investigation, there are 3 different production systems that we are seeing, and it is defined based on stocking density and the inputs that are being given to the system. There are extensive systems, intensive systems, and semi-intensive systems. And the semi-intensive type of system is the one that was predominantly found across the country. Some of the salient points from the field investigations, we investigated 161 farms across 9 states in the country and 1 union territory. The 9 states are the top producing states in terms of aquaculture. And we focused mainly on Indian major carps, but we also kept our eye open for other types of fishes that are being grown. We found that there were some banned fish species that were being grown, such as tilapia, magur catfish, and red-bellied piranha. These are outlawed in the country to be farmed, but people are doing it without any proper licenses also. In terms of water quality issues, I'll talk about qualitative and quantitative aspects based on our investigation. You can see on the top left that algae is being formed along the boundaries of each of the ponds in which the fishes are being grown, which is an indication that the dissolved oxygen content is going to be reduced because of the algae formation, and also that the feed or the amount of nutrient in the water is significantly higher, which drives the production of algae or accumulation of algae. On the right-hand side, you can see that dead fish are being thrown into the farms for the other currently growing fish to consume. I think this is shrimp that is being thrown into the farm. On the bottom left corner, you can see fishes that have died, which are floating, and we observed it in many ponds across the country. And these fishes were not even removed from the ponds when they died for even 2-3 days. From a quantitative perspective, we used some home test kits that we got of Amazon for testing dissolved oxygen and total ammonia and nitrogen, and we used a pH meter to calculate the pH. And we have tested somewhere around 46 samples, and the major observation that we found there was the pH and total ammonia and nitrogen was not so bad, but the dissolved oxygen content was lower than 5 ppm, which is optimal for carp production. In more than 50 to 60% of the farms, we didn't, from the water samples that were taken from 50 to 60% of the farms, the dissolved oxygen content was lesser than 5 ppm. We also sent out 4 water samples to an external third-party testing lab to get all these things tested from an objective perspective, and also we asked them to test for heavy metals such as arsenic, mercury, cadmium, and lead. In all the 4 samples that we sent out, we found traces of lead and cadmium. We are sending out 21 more samples. We have sent out 21 more samples, but we still don't have the data with us. They are doing the testing right now. In some cases, in terms of slaughter method and feed, you can see that the way in which the farmers collect the fish from the ponds is by drag netting, and they allow the fish to suffocate in air. And in some farms, we also observed that rotten fish were macerated and fed into the farm for other fish to consume, as you can see on the right-hand side image here. We also observed live killing of fishes in mainly in fish markets, but it was also observed in the farms. So here you can see a catfish being slaughtered alive. Um, the, the the consumption of antibiotic and growth promoters and insecticides was also higher in these places. The most common form of antibiotic that we found was enrofloxacin, that was commonly used across many fish farms in the country. In terms of insecticides, they were using organophosphate and pyrethroid insecticides. Occasionally, they were using herbal insecticides also. From a growth from a growth promotion point of view, they were using vitamin and mineral-based growth promoters, but also commercially prepared growth promoter mixes were also used. Um, when we ask the question to fish farmers about whether or not the fishes that they grow feel pain, 90% of them agreed that fish felt some sort of stress or discomfort. They didn't admit to the point of pain, but they agreed to the point that they feel some sort of stress or discomfort when farmed for food. This leaves an important question we need to maybe drill deep into and ask them why are they still doing it if they know that it is causing some harm to the fish. Um, an easier hypothesis to say is that that is a necessary evil for them to survive, and that could just be the end of the research. But I'm just saying that is something that we still need to look at. In terms of common diseases found in freshwater farms, for 29% of the freshwater farms that we visited told us that, I mean, the farmers in those farms told us that red spot disease and fish lice were the common types of diseases that they diseases or afflictions that reduce the productivity there. You can see here fish lice in red-bellied piranha. By the way, red-bellied piranha is not supposed to be farmed in the country. Moving on to brackish water, we investigated 80 brackish water farms across 9 states and 1 union territory. The major focus was on white leg shrimp because that is the one, as I talked about in the scale, it is the one with the highest amount of production. In terms of shrimp production in the country, it is reasonably streamlined compared to freshwater aquaculture because of the fact that much of it is destined for exports. Our assumption is that since the industry is streamlined, when I mean streamlined, there is some sort of certification. 355, I think, 355 shrimp farms across the country have best aquaculture practices certification. And that leads us to think that the interventions could be moderately tractable in this case compared to freshwater farms also. Compared to freshwater farms, but there is a major bottleneck here in terms of research. We don't know exactly what needs to be included in the certification apart from the ones that they already have. So we are keeping this as second priority while the major priority is on freshwater fishes. In terms of killing the shrimp, the shrimp are frozen alive and packed in crates and sent in lorries or trucks. We have some footage also. I'm not able to show the footage right now, but we have footage showing the shrimp trying to get out of that place. In terms of the common diseases that we saw in the brackish water farms, white spot syndrome, early mortality syndrome, and enterocytosis and hepatopenia were the 3 major diseases that we found. 40% of the farms reported that these are the 3 major diseases that are common in their farms. Here you can see a shrimp that died due to early mortality syndrome. They call it toxic algae. In terms of environmental issues, I'm not going to rehash the points that Shreya had already spoken about on the second day about destruction of mangrove forest and how it contributes to flooding in the coastal areas. But this is an example of how the shrimp farming sector in the country is polluting natural resources. So you can the on the top picture, the left-hand side area is for the shrimp farms, and the right-hand side is the estuary of a river. And you can see on the bottom picture that from the shrimp farms, effluent water is just pumped into the river. There was no effluent treatment facilities that were available. They were just pumping the wastewater into the river. There was also we also not observed, but having spoken to a few agricultural farmers around areas where shrimp farms were located, we found that there was a lot of conflict between shrimp farmers and agricultural farmers because of the fact that these shrimp farms are letting out effluent water without treatment into the rivers. And also, many of the farms in the country, shrimp farms in the country, are artificially made. So they don't use the existing water which has a higher salinity, but they artificially make areas and just add more salinity to the water. Um, so what happens in these cases is after a few years, when the lease for those farms get over from the government, mostly they are associated with government. So when the lease gets over, these guys are the shrimp farmers have to leave the place, and that place is not usable. It's not cultivable, which makes in addition to that, the due to seepage of water into the groundwater reservoir, the water becomes highly salty, and it becomes non-potable for the people that are living there. And that those are the two major reasons why there was a higher degree of conflict between agricultural farmers and shrimp farmers, but we didn't observe any such kind of conflict between agricultural farmers and freshwater fish farmers. In terms of antibiotic and use of growth promoters, it was also seen in the brackish water farms that we visited. Again, enterofloxacin was the one that was used for as the general purpose antibiotic, and growth promoters were also used for in these shrimp farms. What we could not understand was that the majority of the shrimp produced in the country are exported. We don't know how these shrimp farmers are getting around the regulations that are there for the shrimp that are exported, because there is some regulation around not using antibiotics when exporting. But maybe the antibiotics are approved by the government, and that poses a different type of public health hazard. So since this is a major problem in the country, and India is second behind China in terms of production from aquaculture, there are two major interventions that we want to take up. One is through policy change, and the other through mass awareness. We are arbitrarily now putting up 70% of our resources into policy change and 30% of our resources into mass awareness. This is in line with the current thinking in the effective animal advocacy movement also. So that is how we allocate. That is how we are planning to allocate our resources in terms of interventions. For policy change, the policy proposal is going to be based or built upon three pillars, which are animal welfare, environment protection, and public health protection. So we are going to be using three major strategies to get the policy change work happening around aquaculture. And we're currently targeting two states, Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal. These are the two states which have the highest amount of production in terms of freshwater fish. The first strategy is to develop an advisory group with stakeholders from 5 different categories: animal protection organizations, environment protection organizations, and public health organizations. In addition to these 3 categories of stakeholders, we are also trying to get academicians and government husbandry institutes, fish husbandry institutes, so that we can transfer the ownership onto the government institutes and the academicians, so that the feasibility of the channel through which the policy change proposal comes in is much more acceptable to the government when it goes through the government husbandry institutes themselves, rather than being led by animal protection or environment protection organizations. So that is the first strategy, based upon which the regulation will, through that stakeholder advisory group, the regulation proposal will be developed and submitted to the government for policy change. Secondly, for pressure building in terms of executing the policy change work, we are planning to engage with two different types of stakeholders. The first one is influencers or celebrities, and upper level stakeholders like members of parliament. We are already in touch with a few members of parliament, so we'll be adding this to the agenda also. Secondly, we'll try to build strategic partnerships with animal protection organizations, environment protection organizations, and public health organizations to push this policy change proposal. And we'll also be testing the waters in terms of developing alternate livelihoods, but we don't have the enough, but we don't have enough expertise in the organization to take that up. So we're just going to test the waters to understand the scenario there. Finally, we are planning to develop some sort of a proof of concept model of a high welfare fish farm, so that the government has a solution. So we're not just saying that there are problems in these places, but also showing them solutions that this is a viable way to do it. We don't know how successful it will turn out, but we just want to try that route also. Again, we don't have the expertise in the organization for developing this model high welfare fish farm. So we'll probably be collaborating with organizations that have the expertise with it, in them. Probably we'll collaborate with Fish Welfare Initiative. We are having conversations with them regarding that. In terms of mass awareness, we are planning two major things. In terms of offline awareness raising, we are going to include fish related information or fish farming related information into our existing outreach materials. And we'll also be testing the effectiveness of fish only outreach materials, just to understand if that is more effective than including it along with all the farmed animal work that we are doing. In terms of online digital work, currently we're running a campaign on raising awareness about intelligence and cognizance of fish. This is based on the reasoning that people attribute moral value to animals based on their perception of intelligence of that living being. So we are trying out that angle with the call to action to try out a vegan diet for 21 days. It's like a 21-day challenge that we have. And the future work is going to be focused on gamifying the outreach on digital media, so that in terms of contests or challenges, so that it is easier for people to transition their behavior, or at least their attitude towards fish and behavior at a later point in time. Finally, as I showed some of the snippets from our investigation, we'll be launching the investigation report by mid-December or towards the end of December. And please keep an eye out. We'll also try to share it with everyone, and you can give your comments also. So that will be that will be primarily focused on upper level stakeholders, in bureaucrats who are going to take the decision about policy change. And the salient points from the investigation report will be from a mass awareness point of view, published on print media and digital media. I think so those are the things that we are planning to do. And thank you for listening. I hope I'm on time, and I'll be happy to answer some questions if I can answer them.
Thank you so much, Koushik, for that. We've just had actually two questions come through. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer both of them, but the first, I will go ahead and ask you, how successful have conversations with policymakers been in terms of the type of collaborative work you are planning?
Okay, so from the success point of view, since policy change work takes a lot of time, we are in conversations with different policymakers across the country for different types of farmed animal intervention that we are doing. And each of those things are at different stages in terms of getting them passed. So if I have to put a number on it, I'll have to put a length of time on it also. Maybe in 5 years or 6, 7 years, we might see some success with having conversations with policymakers.
Okay, Thank you so much, Koushik. I believe we wait for the next questions to be answered along with the YouTube video being released, being published. And I would like to thank you so much for a very insightful talk. I think we've all learned so much today, and really grateful for, that you're sharing this knowledge with us. And I will see everyone for our next session, which will be on advocate work in France. And it will be in 5 minutes at 10. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.